The Nanaimo River watershed is part and parcel of who we are as the Snuneymuxw people.
It's a really special place. It's really magical.
It's got huge ecological, recreational, and spiritual values too. I think it's very important.
The growth productivity in the Nanaimo River watershed is some of the best in Western Canada.
There was no compensation. There was no discussion about this decision to privatize the territory.
Every time we turn on our tap, we're reminded of just how important the Nanaimo River is to us.
When you think that 2/3 of your body is made out of water, and in the case of people in Nanaimo, we're made out of this river water, so how we treat the river says something about how we treat our bodies.
It's just such a wonderful area to go and have a look at.
I've swam in the Nanaimo River, hiked the Nanaimo River, and loved the Nanaimo River my entire life.
Over the years, the river's given me so much joy, so much peace.
It is the lifeblood of the community, it really is.
Great Creator of the universe, we truly thank you for this beautiful place we're in. Look at the things you have made. Bless them and bless each and every one of us.
The Snuneymuxw people have lived here for thousands of years, here on Vancouver Island. And this is where we spent the winter, the spring and the fall, parts of the summer, but the whole watershed area of the Nanaimo River is the central part of the Snuneymuxw territory on Vancouver Island. We are who the river is. We're defined by our relationships together with this part of the world. It's what makes the Snuneymuxw people who we are, is our connection to our home.
When the Creator first came, and as the story goes, and all over, even from Mexico, they say, you'll be close to a river, you'll be close to water, because you can't survive without that water.
It's the full range of relationship that any people has with any part of their territories. We have every kind of need that's possible between the Snuneymuxw people and the Nanaimo River and the Nanaimo River watershed.
The Nanaimo River was used for a number of traditional purposes. One of the important uses is bathing. So bathing is a very important part of the culture in terms of spiritual cleansing, and so there are places along the Nanaimo River that community members would have used it for that purpose. Fishing, of course. Fishing would be also been another traditional use. Salmon, predominantly salmon that would have gone up the river, would have been an important resource for community members to harvest and to use. Salmon was a very important part of the culture as well. Many areas along the Nanaimo River would have been used for hunting.
The Nanaimo River watershed is a large one. It's a major drainage on the east side of Vancouver Island. The total area is in the vicinity of 800 square kilometers. The total length of the river, it has several forks and several tributaries, but the main stem length is about 78 kilometers. It's got the largest estuary on all of Vancouver Island, so it's a pretty unique spot. You've got woodland ecosystems, rock outcrops, streamside forest, or what we call riparian.
Well, definitely the entire riparian zone.
along the river is important to the ecological function of the river itself and to the upland areas. Traditionally, riparian zones are the most ecologically diverse zones in the area. They support the most different number of wildlife. It's just a really important habitat because it's such the transition between water to upland areas makes it a really key feature.
We counted something like 16 different distinctive ecosystems within the watershed. Less than 150 hectares of old forest was all that I was able to find in sort of map analysis.
As we could kind of see on the way down here, that there's kind of these beauty strips of like maybe 10 meters that companies have left or development has left or residences have left that leave this tiny strip along the river, and then right behind it is all developed or logged, or there's a road right there. So there's definitely impact in the riparian zones, and some of it's recent, some of it's historical.
We've got the Vancouver Island marmot at the very western margins of the watershed, and Canada's rarest mammal. They've spent a lot of money trying to bring this species back from the brink. So it was encouraging to hear there's somewhere between 100 and 150 marmots in the watershed now. Elk, of course, generates a lot of interest. They're large carnivores, healthy population of bears, a handful of cougars, a handful of wolves, species of things that hang around wetlands and rivers like otters and mink. A lot of people don't know we have a lizard on Vancouver Island, the northern alligator lizard. We have the blue-listed red-legged frog. They have found this rare Vancouver Island water shrew. On the red list, that's the most endangered species. We have the white-top aster, the Olympic onion, and the green-sheathed sedge. Birds, there are just a ton of birds in this watershed.
We're out at the Nanaimo River estuary looking for birds. We're bird watchers, and today we found northern harriers, short-eared owls, Canada geese, lots of ravens, lots of bald eagles.
The Nanaimo River estuary is a significant estuary. It's I believe one of the largest on the island, and come fall time, it's a place where only species just come here to winter. It's the only place you'll find them. So.
Oh, it's really very important for the birds that migrate through here. We've had actually mountain bluebirds a little later in the year. We will get them coming through on migration. And the western meadowlarks also spend lots of the winter here. We have lots of them for the winter here too. And then of course all the ducks, northern pintails and green-winged teal, they spend also the winter here.
The teaching from the Creator was that you have to look after your food and where your food lives. It's their home. Don't damage their home, was the words.
Can you still get the same kind of food out of the estuary now?
No, because of this logs. Especially if it's stuck right close to like a soft sand, and they might damage the edible. And it's called Liliana, like it's the home of the little fish that come out, but it's food for the fish. And when the herons come up, they can put little eggs on them. And then the Indians used to cook the whole thing, take the whole plant out, cut it, and they can cook it and eat the plant and all that, so it was edible. Everything was food for the native people. They used to get a lot of crabs along there. There's hardly any crabs there. Yeah, and they used to have them great big clams there. And it was very special, but hardly any there because of the logs. Before that, it was coal. The coal really stopped and damaged the river estuary.
I have literally seen it where you felt you could walk across the river on the backs of the fish. The river was so so swollen with fish that it would raise the river to where the adjacent land would flood, and the salmon would be out swimming around in the fields. But those days are gone.
The stocks were getting depleted. Chinooks were numbers were slowly declining. The hatchery originally started in 1979, and we have a contract with DFO. We are to produce 750,000 Chinooks, 250,000 coho, 500 to 1 million chum eggs, and also we started a new project about 4 or 5 years ago, pinks, and we do an average of 1.2 million pinks each year. When the fish enters the river, they do a certain process. So we kind of wait for their spawning colors, and that's when we usually bring them back to the hatchery here, and we hold them in tanks, and we check them every 3-4 days to see how the ripeness of the eggs are going.
Okay, so what we're doing right now is we're just doing a pink set. We're after a pink salmon. We just finished pulling the set in. As soon as we can, we're gonna get any incidental species to get out of the set, like any Chinook or any coho. We want to get rid of them in the set and minimize handling of them because they're fairly fresh in the river, and we don't want to handle them if we don't have to. So we want to get them out of the set, and then we can deal with the pinks as we need them.
We do a batch of fish. Let's say we had 8 females, and then we get sperm from 8 males. We put them in the incubators, and they go through different stages, what we call green eggs, eyed eggs, to actually hatching. We have a good partnership with Nanaimo Forest Products. They actually lease us the land, and also included in the lease is the water rights, and we also get hydro supplied.
When it comes to fish habitat, you need the whole river. The salmon start at the estuary, and they work their way all the way up to the First Lake and Second Lakes area.
It's always been, up until probably the 90s, it was almost a world-renowned kind of a river with large fish and really good runs. And obviously that changed, I guess for a variety of reasons. Part of it just mainly habitat degradation, but also ocean conditions. I'd love to see it back to its glory days when tourists would come in from Vancouver and stay for the weekend and catch a lot of fish. And I think it'd be just great for this area if we could ever restore it back to its glory days.
Historically, our club was formed to protect some of these vital areas that are critical to fish and wildlife, and also for the enjoyment of people to see wildlife in their habitat. When we located the Vancouver Island marmot, our club got involved with that. We spent many hours looking at the marmots and deciding how we were going about protecting them. Recently, our club became involved in the cleanup of the derelict Green Mountain Ski Lodge and the whole area. We took on the project to clean up the debris that was left from the lodge itself.
The treaty relationship from 1854 that exists between the Snuneymuxw and the Crown is an important constitutional document of this part of the world, of Canada. It provides a just framework for living together. A really important part of that treaty relationship was the recognition by the Crown of the importance to the Snuneymuxw people to maintain and protect the ongoing relationship between the Snuneymuxw people and their fisheries. The key fishery of the Snuneymuxw people is related to the Nanaimo River. And so the treaty in 1854 came about because the then fledgling government of the colony of Vancouver Island was seeking an economic foundation for its colony. The text talks about the recognition of the Aboriginal title to the village sites and enclosed fields. It talks about the liberty to carry on our fisheries as formerly. and the liberty to hunt over unoccupied lands.
The northern boundary of the Halkominum communities who have come together to negotiate a modern treaty cuts along the Nanaimo River. It's interesting that in British Columbia, 90% of British Columbia is Crown land. And in Halkominum people's territory and in Snuneymuxw people's territory, it's the exact opposite. 90% of our territory is held by these private interests, primarily because of the ENN land grant, and only about 10% is Crown land.
When British Columbia was seeking to join Canada, when they were negotiating with Canada about joining Confederation, one of the foundational constitutional promises that they made to each other was that Canada would link British Columbia to the rest of the country by rail. And the way that that promise was fulfilled and paid for was with Snuneymuxw territory, along with the territory of our other relations up and down southeastern Vancouver Island.
At the time, there was a big dispute about where the end of the railway should be, and Victoria argued that it should be in Victoria.
Well, the only person that they could find and look to, the obvious person to turn to, was Dunsmuir. And Dunsmuir had one of the great fortunes of the time, and that great fortune came from Snuneymuxw coal.
And in exchange for building that, I think it's 75 miles of railway track, they were awarded private fee simple ownership of 2 million acres of land on Vancouver Island.
And for the Snuneymuxw First Nation today, with this ridiculously impoverished land situation we're in, we don't even have enough land to provide for the first, most basic need, which is somewhere to live. We're one of the largest First Nations in the province by population. We have the smallest land base per capita in the country.
The Halkominum have said that there was no treaty, that there was no compensation, that there was no discussion about this decision to privatize the territory. So private lands are held in a very high place under Canadian law. As private landowners, they have the right to make all decisions about the land that they say they own, and the First Nations have absolutely no say in those type of decisions. So that's had a very significant impact on First Nations who are within that core area on Vancouver Island. And federal government and provincial government have said that they're not prepared to compensate or to make restitution for that old grant. Halkominum Treaty Group has taken our case and taken this very issue to the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights in Washington, D.C. We say that international law should apply, that Canada and private corporations have an obligation under international law to, in fact, address this issue. So Halkominum and Snuneymuxw, in terms of the Nanaimo River and decisions that are made along the Nanaimo River, are in a very difficult position.
Well, the Nanaimo River is one of the best and most diverse climbing areas on Vancouver Island. Such a beautiful, wonderful setting, you know, the river rushing, sunshine, trees, great rock climbing, easy access.
Yeah, I traveled quite a bit and climbed in lots of places in the world, and this here is definitely special, one of my favorite spots. The fact that you can combine climbing with swimming on a hot day is rare.
In Canada, a lot of rock climbing ends up being trespassing. We have a lot of people that are worried about access and liability, and it's kind of always been a don't ask, don't tell policy. Most people and landowners are pretty good with it, but nothing is ever really for certain except in parks.
I love the Nanaimo River. It's a place where a lot of the population of Nanaimo come to unwind and enjoy nature and the sound of the river and swim.
This is Nanaimo's local river. It's a great river to teach and introduce students to rafting or whitewater kayaking.
This one is a really neat little river. I started paddling it in the early 70s, teaching kayak courses with the Outward Bound School. Since then, since the late 70s, I've been running outdoor programs using kayaks and rafts on this river, and it's really a good way to learn about the outdoors. This is the outflow of the Nanaimo River from the bottom of First Lake. It's the start of the easier of the several whitewater runs that we do on this river. One of the problems with this river is access. While we can get on the river easily here, it's private land, and there are very few spots where you can get on and off the river easily below here. We'll be doing a run to a spot on private land today that just through the goodwill of the forestry company, we're allowed to access the water. The problem we've been having historically, especially with the rafts, is that you need a spot where there's a road to get the kayak or the raft on or off the river. So it really restricts and reduces how much of the river we can do.
Without access, the recreation basically stops. We just cannot do it. And if it's just a matter of 2 points of access, from here and then right at the bottom, then the significance there is that we're committed to a longer trip, which may stretch people's ability and raise the risk factor. We need access at varying points through the river to make it a safe and worthwhile recreational experience.
Every river has its own character, and this river changes character with water levels radically from here we are in June. It's pretty unusual to be paddling this river in June with this much water. So it's pleasant to be in here in the sunlight, but I've done a lot of paddling here in mid-January, February, March, at real high flow levels where you can actually smell the earth because of the floods. So that's pretty exciting paddling, whereas this is casual.
I'm Jennifer Doyle. I'm the park manager here at Wild Play Element Parks in Nanaimo. And as you can see, we're in the beautiful canyon where we have some of our activities. We have bungee jumping and we have a king swing, as well as a canyon zip that goes across the canyon and down underneath the bungee bridge and through the canyon. We also have something called Monkito, which is an aerial obstacle course through the trees. And it's all kind of centered on 17 acres around the Nanaimo River. I love this area right here. It's my work, but it's also my play area. A lot of staff come here on their days off and they'll come for a swim, come and just enjoy the park because it is such a beautiful place.
The Nanaimo River watershed in its expanse is very large. It's about 84,000 hectares. Of that, about 85% is managed under private forest land by 2 different forest companies, one of which is Island Timberlands.
Of the total watershed, Island owns and manages about 33%.
Timber West owns about 55% of this 84,000 hectare watershed. That's the majority of it. It's all private managed forest land.
The stake for us is incredible. Land management is a very real part of us being a success as a company.
What we do is practice sustainable forest management. What you see behind me is a testament to our daily encounter with the concept of sustainability. We're here because the trees grew back from the first harvest. We're going to be here the next time because the trees will grow back from the current harvesting that occurs.
As you look probably behind me and around me, you can see the trees are doing amazingly well. The growth productivity in the Nanaimo River watershed is some of the best in Western Canada.
In less than 2 hours, a truckload of excellent quality forest products will grow.
We do look at opportunities from time to time in different areas for changes in land use, whether it be, say, movement to residential development is one example. For the Nanaimo River watershed, there's no current plans for real estate development. It's planned for timber production.
We do have some other activities, some alternate uses. We're working on some potential wind farm development. We also have some gravel resources and some small areas of our land, some carbon projects. We also have some small real estate developments, including potentially within this watershed, depending on how the local government fits in with what we prefer for alternative uses in those areas. On our private land, much like any private landowner, public safety and the safety of those who come onto your property and the liability associated with that is a significant consideration in our line of business. We're also very concerned about forest fires, vandalism, and just general garbage dumping, which is quite common in this part of the world, unfortunately.
Management practices change over time, and that's part of our practice. So our plans are developed and implemented and evaluated by qualified forest professionals.
About 6 years ago, Timber West did transition to a fully contract logging model. So we have, instead of former company crews working for us in the Nanaimo Lakes watershed, contract crews of about, in the order of about a dozen, who now do our harvesting for us. They still deliver our logs to local mills. When that demand is filled, we also export the remainder of our forest products to the United States, Japan, or other points in Asia.
My grandfather bought this property in 1897. It's been used for raising cattle, horses, Christmas trees, potatoes, sawmill site here. We have local people harvest the timber. We have local people yarding and processing and hauling the timber up here. We put that timber through our own mill facility. We use about 50% locally for local projects, about 50% we export. So it's really a utopian situation. It's the the butcher, baker, candlestick maker thing, where the timber is used in the community, the money is spent in the community, as opposed to exporting the jobs with the logs out of the province.
I come every summer since I arrived to Canada 4 years ago. I like to read, to meditate, and to play cards. Sometimes I come with people and I play cards here.
My friends and I have grown up here, and it's one of the most beautiful, magical places I've ever known, and I always come back. Every time I come back to Nanaimo, I come to the river.
I like coming to the river because it's not as busy as the lakes, and it's so big and so fresh and clean.
Did you know that when you came down here that you were trespassing?
I was trespassing? Really? It's not a public place? I didn't know that.
I had no idea I was trespassing. I don't see how someone could own this land and, keep it for themselves and not want to share it with people who are gonna treat it well.
I think the river must be public. In my country, all the rivers are public. We have a space, big space for people to be there, same the beaches. But here, they are private, and I think it's not fair. This is nature, and it's for everybody.
I'd feel a sense of loss about not being able to come and recreate on the river how I'd like to, and how I want to do it with students, and how I want to do it as an individual. And that's swimming, that's kayaking, that's rafting, and that's even bringing my kids here. Potentially could be even the rock climbing that I enjoy doing here now. All this stuff is happening on private property. So there's a threat there that you might lose that ability to access that land. And then that's it. Those activities have to stop.
I've been coming down to this spot for years on end, and was surprised this year to see the development down here. I've heard rumors of development, and I thought the forest companies would just take the timber and leave the rest and have it grow back. And here they are, progress coming down towards the river, and this is one of the most pristine rivers that I've ever been on, and I've been on it for about 20, 25 years, and I keep moving up towards the lakes because it's getting busier and more active, and my concern is not only with the development, but the way people treat the river and the garbage they leave behind and the bottle caps and the glass and et cetera, et cetera. this river here is for the young, for the next generation, and we got to treat it with respect.
I'm appalled that they're gonna put a bunch of houses here because they've already done it to so many other places. This place is awesome. It's got like nice water, cool rocks, a small island. People should be able to just go to rivers, but not totally trash it by throwing garbage in the water. And I hope we'll be able to come here after they do all these houses.
They should make it a park so people can go down swimming and the animals can stay in their homes.
And they could just stop all this and put some tree seeds around. Hopefully, maybe it would regrow.
But don't you think that the people that own this should have a right to do whatever they want with it?
True, but don't forget, even though they own it, there are a lot of animals here that own it just as much as them.
They didn't ask the animals.
This is our favorite swimming hole. We want to come back.
Clearly, there's going to be development. So I'm all for cooperating and having developers understand that part of the development is also enhancing the recreational side around the development.
I think that any development is good as long as there's nothing going in the river. I mean, you can have a septic tank and it could be a tank that's holding, and as long as that sewage is taken out of that tank and taken to the other end of town and gone through the treatment plant, there's no problem.
Anytime I've been down a river with houses to the side, we're always a source of entertainment. People sitting on the verandas, having the barbecues, waving and cheering. They're part of it. So we can add to it by having access.
The Nanaimo River Regional Park is it's about 56 hectares in size, so fairly substantial. It includes the river as well too, which is ever changing over the last decade or so. It's the only regional park, or very significant regional park along the Nanaimo River itself. So it came on board in the year 2000 after a fairly extensive fundraising campaign launched by TLC, or the Land Conservancy of BC.
The threat to it was that it would be logged, that the timber could be removed, and that would have a huge impact on the habitat of the salmon in the river and the rearing areas. So there were two separate parcels there when we purchased one parcel and then the second parcel a few months after that to create the beginning of, for us, the beginning of the Nanaimo River Regional Park.
Its uses are all over the map. It has a high recreational use. The majority of the park is protected as a conservation area, primarily for the fish habitat that this land is critical to. Rivers are kind of unique in a way that you can be on top of a river and get through, but the river bottom itself could be actually privately owned.
We've got a small start on what could be a magnificent regional park or protected area along the Nanaimo River that could rival the protections on the Cowichan River and in the Souk River, the Souk Potholes area.
If we move upstream from where we're here today, there's a major landowner, Timber West. There is some development taking place up there where there's some parcel averaging or boundary adjustments taking place. And through that process, or the subdivision process, we're trying to secure some land that has been known to be used for its recreational aspects. We've consulted with stakeholder groups, including VIU, who have very active along the river, to sort of see where they're pulling in, pulling out. So in working with the developer, or in this case Couverdin, we've identified some area that is a key element of the river and a key aspect for the pull in, pull out side. And so 10 hectares of land could come on board if the subdivision is approved.
All right, one more time.
Well, we've long had the Nanaimo River on our kind of radar screen or wish list or whatever you would describe it. We would love to see more of the river protected and more opportunities for people to access the river also for recreational purposes, but certainly the Nanaimo River is really central to Nanaimo. We get our water there. It's got fantastic fish values. We just think it's really central to the whole Nanaimo area.
city's drinking water comes from the South Fork of the Nanaimo River, and it's a sub-watershed of the main Nanaimo River watershed. It's about 210 square kilometers, which is about 3 times the land area of the city. And it's about a quarter of the size, let's say, of the overall Nanaimo River basin. The city stores water here at Jump Lake. We're standing right now on the Jump Lake Dam, or the Jump Creek Dam, which was built in 1975, was built to store water that we receive from snowmelt and rainfall during the wintertime for summertime use, because that's when the largest demand occurs and the least amount of precipitation. So this lake can store up to about 16.5 million cubic meters, which is roughly equivalent to the water that's consumed within the city in a year. The city works with others in the watershed, and most notably Nanaimo Forest Products, to release water for the in-stream fisheries. And the city actually takes only about 3% of the rain and snowmelt that falls as drinking water. So Jump Lake, typically we feed water from here. There's a structure called a low-level outlet. It's kind of like the drain in a bathtub, but we can control how much water is running out. So we release that down the river and pick it up again at the South Fork Dam, which is a 1930s vintage dam that serves as the city's collection point for its water system. At the South Fork Dam, we then pipe it into the city. There's the twin pipelines. 30% of that gets dumped into our reservoir number 1, where it gets chlorinated and then feeds the city center. The other 70% or so goes through the other pipeline, gets chlorinated as it approaches town, and then feeds the entire north end of the city as well as Duke Point.
This dam holds 35,800 acre feet of water, and the water is stored for the pulp mill operation, which is in Nanaimo. The dam was originally surveyed back in 1948-49. Construction took place 49-50. The dam captures the water, and then the water is released into the creek here locally, and then it's recaptured by the mill at the Nanaimo River Bridge. You'll see the pump houses that are directly below the bridge, and from there it's fed by pipeline into the mill, where it's used for the production of pulp. We contribute money to the federal government, and the city also contributes to the federal government, and they maintain a measuring station. It's called the Granby Gauge, and the federal government measures the bottom of the river, and at that point in the river they calculate how much the flow is at any given time. And from that flow, then we take that and we regulate how much water we release into the river system to meet our requirements and to meet the flow of the river. Well, I personally believe that if the dam didn't exist, the Nanaimo River would come close, if not dry up completely, on our extremely hot summers. Because of the dam, we maintain a residual flow in the river system.
So for the Jump Creek watershed, and that's the basis of the city of Nanaimo's water supply, we own and manage upwards of 90% of the Jump Creek watershed.
We're getting close to meeting the capacity of this reservoir. So the long-term view is, at this point, is to continue to look at a location for another storage reservoir and a dam somewhere within the South Fork watershed. And this will enable the life of the system to be extended for a further 50 or 60 years.
Well, we have a number of concerns with the river itself and the watershed in particular. Our goal is to try and get Nanaimo's watershed publicly owned and operated, maintained, and that's for obvious reasons. We think that the public is better suited to look after their own water supply than the private sector. So with Nanaimo building its infrastructure because of growth, etc., what we'd like to see is a more natural watershed, which is hard to get with a forest company working in the area. Not that it's impossible, but with the current methods of logging, etc., it's really tough to do both, to have a pristine watershed and have commercial logging going on in the same place. There was a concern several years ago about the fertilizer, where the fertilizer came from that was used in our watershed.
Weyerhaeuser used chemical fertilizers for several years in the watershed without even bothering to inform the Greater Nanaimo Water District. We were tree planting, and we'd get a big contract on southern Vancouver Island with Weyerhaeuser every year. This granular fertilizer that Weyerhaeuser was using in the Nanaimo drinking watershed was just really noxious. I mean, there was people vomiting and skin conditions, nosebleeds, headaches, and we knew the stuff was toxic. We took a sample of the product to can test laboratories in Vancouver. Weyerhaeuser wouldn't test it, you know. And it came back with very alarming levels of cadmium. That was the one thing that the lab technician was particularly shocked about, was the amount of cadmium in it. But there was also other carcinogenic heavy metals like chromium, strontium, nickel, and zinc, all at heightened levels. We asked Weyerhaeuser in the city of Nanaimo, we raised the alarm and said, hey, you know, there's dioxin in those fertilizers, the most toxic substance known to humans. You should test for that. And they both refused. My most recent FOI package has shown that, in fact, the Water District did go out and do a dioxin and furan test on those fertilizers, and the results were positive. There were dioxins and furans in those fertilizers. My estimation is that there's somewhere between 60 and 75 tons of that product still sitting there in the Nanaimo drinking watershed.
For the Jump Creek watershed in specific, we don't do any aerial fertilization anymore. As for at-planting fertilization, it's not a general practice that forest companies in the Nanaimo River watershed do regularly. It'd be on a site-specific basis. So for the for the Jump Lake watershed in specific as island timberlands, it's not a general practice. For the Nanaimo watershed en masse, aerial fertilization or planting at the site of the tree is something that would be considered for increased growth opportunities.
Part of our water supply strategy in the long term, and also to respond to changing regulations, is to construct a water treatment plant. So this directly supports the goal and the strategy of protecting and providing a safe and sustainable drinking water supply. It will take the water that comes from the South Nanaimo watershed, filter it, and then provide it onto the city for drinking.
There's a lot of cost involved in terms of membrane treatment. We're only putting treatment in because we have turbidity. The reason that we have turbidity is because of the industrial activity that takes place in our watershed. We think that the better plan would be to buy the watershed, to look at alternative treatment programs, sand filtration, etc., which is much cheaper than membrane filtration, and put the extra money towards the purchase of the watershed. And if we can't purchase all of the watershed at one time, then maybe just purchase the important parts, the parts that we can afford now, but have a long-term plan to buy the watershed, which we don't see at the moment. We have an opportunity to turn Nanaimo's watershed into something like Victoria or Vancouver has, which is a protected watershed. It's protected by legislation, and we think that Nanaimo and many other communities on the island should have protected watersheds.
Our treatment costs are very low because we control what happens in the watershed. We have a very, very high quality water source. With owning the watershed, you can control the activities that are occurring in the watershed. It's managed from the perspective of providing drinking water. So we don't allow any industrial or commercial type activities at the watershed.
The Cassidy Aquifer is, and that covers, the area under Cassidy, is connected actually to the Nanaimo River. And so it's really important that we understand the connections between the groundwater and the surface water so we can make sure we protect that important flow in dry summer months. That flow is called base flow, and it's very important for fish rearing and also just for maintaining ecological health. We need to work to better understand how the Cassidy Aquifer is connected to the Nanaimo River, and we have some work planned for that in the coming year. It's called a water balance. We want to develop a three-dimensional model.
There is no regulations by the BC government around aquifers and groundwater, and so that leads to problems such as we see with the Nanaimo Airport, where they're planning to put major development above the Cassidy Aquifer, only meters above, water and sewage treatment, and adjacent commercial residential development.
The regional district, they have what's called the regional growth strategy, and so the focus, or sort of the main strategy that's part of that, is to focus growth in designated areas. So most of that growth will actually be going into the municipalities like Nanaimo, Parksville, Qualicum Beach, and Lanceville. But then there's also what are called rural village centers, which is focused around the Cedar 49th parallel store. And then the other one is in Cassidy, just across from the airport.
There's these major mega developments by forest companies and others putting 10,000 new residents into this area who are going to then become dependent in this rural area upon this vulnerable and threatened aquifer.
I enjoy the forest and the river. It's a wonderful asset that I think the community needs to take more responsibility in managing, particularly the vandalism.
We just really want the public to be informed about where their water comes from, how good it is in the Nanaimo area, and how we can keep it that way.
I'm very much an advocate of just a Class A provincial park.
Generation after generation of foresters have spent their career in the Nanaimo Lakes watershed. That's still going on today.
Another 50 to 100 years, what's it going to be like?
Where is the food going to be?
It's one of the most priceless things that we're going to have. Our places where people can go and find what I call space, beauty, and solitude.
I've never found anywhere I like to swim quite as much as the Nanaimo River. It's beautiful.
We'd love to see a trail system all the way down so that people could enjoy it rather than just the private users.
You see fantastic provincial parks in British Columbia that are for rivers.
I don't know why we can't expropriate land to build a trail along the river.
There's an opportunity for the community to take control of its watershed and make it an asset for future generations that will make such a difference 100, 200 years from now.
For everyone that has taken an interest in the way that you've described, they really need to turn their mind and educate themselves about the relationship of the Snuneymuxw people to the Nanaimo River.
We have a job to do, that we got to watch the environment